A subtle chill lingers in the air as we rewind the tape of American self-help culture. A sprawling, lucrative industry whose roots entangle the desperate aspirations of millions. The late 1990s. The world stands on the edge of a new millennium, haunted by Y2K anxieties and seduced by the promise of the internet's first boom. In hotel conference rooms and suburban auditoriums, the glow of fluorescent lights bathes eager faces. The air is thick with the mantras of positive thinking, the gospel of self-actualization. People flock to charismatic speakers, hungry for blueprints to transcend the banality of ordinary life. It is here, in this well-intentioned search for meaning, that the first seeds of NXIVM are sown. Quietly, almost invisibly. Albany, New York, a city rarely mentioned in the same breath as innovation or celebrity, yet perfectly suited for something to grow unnoticed, away from the scrutiny of coastal elites. In this unremarkable setting, Keith Raniere emerges, a man with the gaze of a chess player and the calm of a practiced manipulator. He is neither a household name nor an academic icon. His credentials are obscure, his past a tapestry of half-truths. Yet Raniere possesses an uncanny ability to peer into the vulnerabilities of those around him, to offer the illusion of answers where only questions exist. He is the architect of a new doctrine, executive success programs, promising transformation, fulfillment, and a kind of secret knowledge reserved only for the bold. This era is obsessed with self-mastery. From Tony Robbins's stadium spectacles to the proliferation of corporate coaching, the appetite for self-optimization is ravenous. The American dream, once rooted in collective progress, has become a solitary pursuit of personal excellence. Raniere, with his deliberately enigmatic aura, positions himself as the ultimate gatekeeper. NXIVM emerges not as a cult, but as a movement. Its rhetoric is polished, its workshops meticulous. The language is one of enlightenment, of empowerment, of unlocking hidden potential. But beneath the surface, something darker stirs. The organization's early days are marked by a sense of exclusivity. Entry is expensive, thousands of dollars for a single seminar. Attendees sign confidentiality agreements, surrendering their privacy in exchange for the promise of transformation. The curriculum is dense, filled with acronyms and pseudoscientific jargon. Participants are encouraged to confront their fears, to break down emotional barriers, to submit to the process. The line between mentor and disciple blurs. The boundary between autonomy and submission begins to erode. Raniere is always present, even when unseen. His teachings woven into every exercise. His approval the ultimate prize. For many, the first steps into NXIVM are exhilarating. The community is tight-knit, the atmosphere electric with possibility. Success stories circulate like currency. Testimonies of lives changed, careers revitalized, relationships healed. But there are whispers, too. Stories of sleepless nights, of relentless pressure to recruit others, of loyalty demanded at all costs. The organization's inner circle grows more insular, its rituals more opaque. The cost of entry, it turns out, is nothing compared to the price of escape. But what happened next is even more unsettling. NXIVM's philosophy, cloaked in the jargon of empowerment, begins to morph. The promise of self-improvement becomes a tool for control. Within these walls, ambition and vulnerability are harvested, transformed into currency for those at the top. The first participants walk willingly into the labyrinth, unaware that the exit is already disappearing behind them. As the new century dawns, NXIVM's machinery whirs into motion, fueled by a steady influx of seekers, corporate professionals, artists, caregivers, and dreamers, each drawn by the promise of inner mastery. The organization operates out of discreet offices and idyllic suburban homes, cultivating an air of exclusivity. Recruitment is subtle, almost seductive. Participants are told they are among the chosen few, elevated above the masses by their willingness to question everything, to challenge their own limitations. The sense of privilege is intoxicating, and the hunger for belonging grows with every whispered invitation. Keith Rainier, who styles himself as Vanguard, becomes a myth within NXIVM's hallowed halls. His presence is rarefied. He is a teacher, a philosopher, a figure to be emulated, but never truly understood. Students are encouraged to treat his words as gospel, to internalize his worldview. The teachings are dense, laced with philosophical concepts and pseudo-scientific methods. Students are asked to trace the origins of their fears, to dismantle the beliefs that hold them back, and to subject themselves to unflinching feedback in the name of progress. Loyalty is the unspoken currency. Questioning the system is quietly discouraged. Rainier's charisma is magnetic, but his gaze is clinical. He studies his followers as if they are pieces on a chessboard, moving them with calculated precision. Within this world, NXIVM's inner mechanisms reveal their true purpose: control. The group's signature intensives, multi-day workshops, stretch participants to their emotional limits. Sleep deprivation, group pressure, and confessional exercises chip away at personal boundaries. Each person is assigned a mentor, but the relationship is not one of mutual support. It is one of surveillance and subtle coercion. Progress is tracked, not by personal growth, but by obedience and recruitment. The more loyal and compliant a member becomes, the closer they are drawn into the orbit of Rainier and his trusted lieutenants. The organization's language becomes a second skin, its rituals a daily necessity. The structure of NXIVM is hierarchical, with levels that mimic corporate ladders, but serve a more insidious function. Advancement is dangled like a prize, yet always just out of reach. Members are encouraged to recruit friends and family, expanding the organization's reach while deepening their own psychological investment. The web grows tighter. Each new recruit is both a testament to one's commitment and a potential informant. Every act of vulnerability becomes a piece of collateral, stored and remembered. The community, once a source of comfort, transforms into a network of watchers and the watched. NXIVM's experiments with human behavior move beyond self-help into something far more dangerous. The lines between personal development and indoctrination blur further. Rainier's influence seeps into every aspect of his followers' lives. Their diets, their sleep schedules, their romantic choices, even their most private thoughts. What started as a path to self-realization is quickly becoming a labyrinth of manipulation, a system where the promise of freedom is traded for invisible chains. The organization's philosophy, once a beacon of hope, becomes a doctrine of submission. Only later will it become clear the true innovation of NXIVM was not in helping people reach their potential, but in teaching them to surrender it, slowly, piece by piece, in the name of belonging. The walls close in, and the outside world fades to a distant, unreachable memory. The cost of entry, once measured in dollars and time, is now counted in fragments of selfhood, quietly surrendered to a cause that demands everything and gives nothing in return. It is within this climate of absolute devotion that the first cracks in the NXIVM facade begin to form. The organization's demands escalate, no longer confined to seminar rooms or the language of self-improvement. Members are tasked with relentless self-surveillance and with documenting the shortcomings of those around them. The sense of community that once offered solace now functions as an instrument of peer pressure and fear. The boundaries of personal autonomy are not just blurred, they are actively dismantled until the individual is left exposed before the group and, above all, before Rainier. At the heart of this transformation lies a mechanism of obedience that is both insidious and devastatingly effective. Members are required to provide damaging personal secrets, collateral, to their mentors, pledging these confessions as a sign of loyalty. This collateral, often consisting of embarrassing stories, intimate photographs, or confessions of supposed wrongdoings, is not merely symbolic. It is a leash held tightly by those in power, ready to be yanked at the slightest sign of dissent. The fear of exposure becomes a silent warden, policing the thoughts and actions of every participant. The threat is never spoken aloud, but it hangs in the air, a constant, invisible pressure. Social isolation deepens as members are encouraged to sever ties with outsiders, friends, family, and even spouses who question the group's practices. Any form of skepticism is framed as a personal failing, a sign of weakness or lack of commitment. The group's rituals intensify: late-night meetings, physically demanding challenges, and psychological exercises designed to break down resistance. The facade of empowerment grows ever more brittle, replaced by a culture of exhaustion and submission. The idea of leaving becomes unthinkable, the world outside painted as hostile and dangerous. Those who attempt to leave are subjected to public shaming, their collateral wielded as a weapon to ensure silence. Rainieri's control expands beyond the philosophical and into the most intimate aspects of his followers' lives. Diets are prescribed, sleep is regulated, and romantic relationships are orchestrated to serve the group's interests. Women, in particular, become targets for more sinister forms of domination. A secret subgroup begins to emerge within NXIVM, operating in the shadows of an already secretive organization. This inner circle, known only to a select few, is bound by even more extreme rituals and oaths. The full horror of this structure remains hidden, for now, behind layers of coded language and ritual. But the first victims have already begun to suffer, marked, quite literally, as property of the organization. But the story only grows darker, as the lines between self-sacrifice and self-destruction blur. The group's devotion is weaponized against its own members. The transformation is complete. NXIVM is no longer a movement for self-realization, but a machine of compliance, a system that rewards silence and punishes doubt. The stage is set for the most chilling chapters yet to unfold, where the cost of loyalty is measured not only in secrets, but in scars, both visible and invisible. Here begins the part most shrouded in shadow: the emergence of DOS, a secret society operating within the core of NXIVM, an inner sanctum where submission is no longer metaphorical, but is etched into flesh. DOS, an acronym for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, presents itself as a women's empowerment sisterhood, but its reality is a web of blackmail, ritualized degradation, and sexual coercion. In this chamber of secrecy, the architecture of control takes on a new, chilling form. Recruited under the guise of elite mentorship, women are required to provide ever more intimate collateral, photographs, confessions, property deeds, ensuring obedience through the omnipresent threat of exposure. Their entry into DOS is marked by a ceremony that defies imagination. In dim rooms, stripped of agency, some are branded with a cauterizing pen. The mark, they are told, is a symbol of strength, a badge of transformation. But the shape seared into their skin is no abstract emblem. It hides the initials of Keith Raniere himself. The branding is filmed, the victims instructed to declare their devotion as the scent of burning flesh fills the air. Pain becomes ritual. Endurance is equated with loyalty. The act is not a moment of empowerment, but a declaration of ownership, an irreversible crossing of a line that can never be uncrossed. Within DOS, the hierarchy mimics the broader structure of NXIVM, but its bonds are forged through suffering and secrecy. Masters command slaves, demanding tasks, extracting confessions, and orchestrating acts of humiliation. The line between mentor and tormentor is obliterated. Slaves face starvation diets, sleep deprivation, and isolation from loved ones. They are ordered to recruit others, perpetuating the cycle. Sexual access to Raniere is demanded under the pretext of furthering personal growth, all justified by twisted interpretations of empowerment and discipline. The language of self-betterment is weaponized, turned into a tool for domination. The psychological toll is immense. Women are forced to police their own thoughts, to compete for approval, to internalize blame for their own suffering. The group's rituals become more elaborate, the punishments more severe. Some are made to perform acts that violate their deepest values, their sense of self eroded with each passing day. The outside world becomes a distant echo. Reality itself distorted by the relentless pressure to conform and obey. Even those in NXIVM's outer layers suspect little, for the group's compartmentalization is near total. The organization thrives on plausible deniability and the enforcement of silence. Legal threats, psychological manipulation, and the constant specter of blackmail keep the circle unbroken. The world outside slumbers, while within, the suffering deepens, a quiet agony endured beneath the polished surface of motivational seminars and public appearances. But the spiral is tightening. Rumors begin to leak, whispered between those who dare to question the order. Some members, tormented by guilt and fear, contemplate escape, their sense of reality eroded by months or years of gaslighting. The cost of breaking free feels insurmountable. Friendships are weaponized. Love is twisted into control, and the very language of healing is co-opted to perpetuate harm. Here, in the architecture of DOS, the true horror of NXIVM is laid bare. A world where trust is currency, freedom is myth, and the price of belonging is paid in wounds that may never heal. The spiral of secrecy and suffering could not last forever. The whispers that once flickered in shadowed corners began to sharpen into voices, voices that would not be silenced. A few, battered but unbroken, reached for the world outside. They collected evidence, recorded conversations, and risked everything to contact journalists, law enforcement, and former allies. The fortress of NXIVM, so carefully engineered to isolate and intimidate, began to fracture from within. In 2017, the world was jolted awake. A series of investigative reports, most notably a harrowing expose in the New York Times, brought the hidden nightmare into the light. The stories were impossible to ignore. Respected professionals, actors, and daughters of privilege spoke in measured, trembling voices about branding ceremonies, sexual enslavement, and a regime of blackmail. The public recoiled in horror. Authorities, pressured by mounting evidence and public outrage, moved in. The myth of NXIVM as a haven for the ambitious and enlightened was shattered in a matter of weeks, replaced by the grim reality of a criminal enterprise built on silence and pain. The ensuing investigation revealed a labyrinth of crimes: racketeering, forced labor, identity theft, sex trafficking, and obstruction of justice. Homes were raided, bank accounts frozen, and digital trails meticulously untangled. Ranier fled to Mexico, but the web was closing. In a final, unremarkable room, he was arrested, his eyes empty behind the glass of a surveillance camera. Other high-ranking members, women who had once been both victims and perpetrators, were indicted. The image of NXIVM as a self-help utopia crumbled. In its place, a criminal empire exposed to the harsh glare of justice. Courtrooms filled with the testimonies of those who had survived, their words heavy with the weight of years lost and innocence stolen. But the collapse of NXIVM did not bring instant healing. Survivors faced the daunting task of reclaiming their lives. Many struggled with post-traumatic stress, broken relationships, and the stigma of having been deceived by a cause they once believed in. The courts delivered sentences. Ranieri received 120 years, but the pain could not be legislated away. Families remained divided. Scars lingered, visible and invisible. Trust, once weaponized, became almost impossible to rebuild. Some survivors found solace in advocacy, sharing their stories to warn others, while others retreated from the public eye, haunted by memories that refused to fade. Yet, the world outside could no longer claim ignorance. The NXIVM scandal triggered a reckoning far beyond its own ruined walls. It forced a broader conversation about the dangers lurking within charismatic movements, the seductive power of groupthink, and the vulnerability of those seeking meaning and belonging. It revealed how easily the tools of empowerment can be twisted into shackles, and how the architecture of abuse can hide in plain sight, behind motivational slogans, professional facades, and the language of transformation. Lawmakers and mental health professionals began to scrutinize similar organizations, searching for warning signs that had gone unnoticed for too long. Even now, the echoes persist. New movements arise, promising salvation, armed with the same rhetoric and mechanisms of control. The lessons of NXIVM remain urgent, unresolved, a warning etched into history and into the lives of those who survived. The world watches, wary, knowing that the line between healing and harm is thinner than anyone dares to imagine. Amid the debris left by NXIVM's collapse, individual lives tell stories more powerful than any headline. In a quiet apartment, one survivor, let's call her Sarah, sits by her window as sunlight filters through the blinds. She stares at the faint scar on her hip, an unchosen mark, a reminder of nights spent trembling under the weight of another's will. The world outside moves on, but inside her, time is fractured, divided forever into before and after. The city's noise is distant, muffled by the thick glass, but inside her mind, echoes of commands and rituals still reverberate. Sarah's journey out did not begin with a grand epiphany, but with a slow, gnawing doubt. For months, she clung to the hope that the pain was necessary, that submission was strength. Her world had shrunk to the dimensions of NXIVM's teachings. Friends outside were dismissed as unenlightened, family as obstacles. But the rituals grew stranger, the punishments more severe. The voice of her own conscience, long suppressed, began to flicker back to life. It was not one moment, but 1,000 small cracks. The memory of a childhood friend, the wordless terror in another woman's eyes, the realization that empowerment should never cost one's dignity. The group's language, once a source of comfort, became a prison of contradictions. The decision to leave was not heroic, but desperate. She deleted encrypted messages, packed a single bag, and slipped out before dawn, haunted by the fear that someone would come for her. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, medical appointments, and nights spent awake, jumping at every sound. The support network for survivors was thin, and the stigma suffocating. Some former friends accused her of betrayal. Others simply turned away. But in the aftermath, Sarah discovered something she had forgotten: a stubborn ember of self-worth. It was fragile, but alive. She began to write, filling notebooks with memories and confessions, trying to untangle the knots left by years of manipulation. Recovery was not a straight path. There were setbacks, panic attacks, moments of crushing guilt and confusion. Yet, in therapy sessions and survivor support groups, she found echoes of her own story. She met others who bore different scars, some physical, some invisible, but all shaped by the same machinery of control. Together, they rebuilt the language of trust, redefining belonging not as submission, but as connection freely given. Each day, Sarah chooses to reclaim her voice, speaking out not for vengeance, but so others might recognize the warning signs she once ignored. She volunteers at a crisis center, her story a lifeline for those still trapped in cycles of coercion. Her story is not one of complete closure. The echoes of NXIVM linger, in nightmares, in moments of doubt, in the scar she traces with her fingertips. But there is also hope, fragile yet persistent. In the quiet of her own home, Sarah learns that survival is not just escape. It is the reclamation of self, one unsteady step at a time. The world may never fully understand the cost, but for Sarah and others like her, every day lived in freedom is a quiet act of defiance, a promise that the machinery of control can be broken, and that healing, though slow, is possible. History is a restless witness as the dust settles over the ruins of NXIVM. What remains is neither a simple cautionary tale, nor a spectacle of evil easily dismissed. The shadows cast by these events reach far beyond the individuals and courtrooms, lingering in the quiet places where hope and vulnerability converge. The machinery of manipulation revealed in NXIVM's story is not unique. It is an extension of ancient patterns, an echo of the human longing to belong, to find meaning, to be seen and understood. The same hunger that built communities and civilizations can, in the wrong hands, become a tool for subjugation. We live in an age saturated with promises of transformation, self-help movements, charismatic leaders, and the rhetoric of empowerment proliferate at every turn. Each offers a map out of the labyrinth of uncertainty, a ladder towards some imagined pinnacle of self-knowledge and power. But as this story shows, the same tools that heal can be turned to harm, and the same yearning that binds communities can be weaponized into chains. The line between guidance and control, between inspiration and indoctrination, is perilously thin, often invisible until it is too late. The NXIVM saga is a stark reminder that the architecture of abuse often hides in plain sight, draped in the language of progress and hope. NXIVM's legacy is not only one of suffering, but of revelation. It forces us to ask, what is the true cost of belonging? How do we discern the boundary between guidance and control, between collective purpose and personal autonomy? Where does the responsibility lie? Within the leader, the follower, or the society that allows such structures to flourish in silence? The answers are neither simple nor comforting. They demand that we look not only at the perpetrators, but at the cultural soil that nourishes them. The silence of bystanders, the allure of certainty, the fear of exclusion. Perhaps the most sobering lesson is that evil does not always announce itself with cruelty or violence. Sometimes it comes dressed as love, progress, or caring. Its touch gentle, its voice persuasive, its face familiar. Sometimes the deepest wounds are those that cannot be seen, inflicted not with force, but with the slow erosion of autonomy and trust. The scars left by NXIVM are not just physical, but existential, a reminder that the loss of self can happen quietly, in the name of something beautiful. To bear witness to stories like Sarah's is to carry forward a warning. We must cultivate vigilance, not only toward the powerful, but within ourselves. To question not only the intentions of those who lead, but the places in our own hearts that hunger for certainty and belonging. The world is full of labyrinths, each promising escape from doubt, from pain, from the messiness of being human. But the only freedom worth having is one that is chosen, questioned, and reclaimed, again and again, in defiance of every force that would turn hope into a weapon. This is the shadow that remains, and the responsibility we inherit. May we remember, and may we never look away. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more investigations into the hidden corners of history and the human soul. Yet even as the story closes, the world outside remains restless, its hidden corners still teeming with unanswered questions. The end of NXIVM is not the end of the forces that made it possible. In every society, there are silences waiting to be filled, hungers for meaning that can be twisted, and vulnerabilities that can be exploited. The lessons carved from this darkness are never truly finished. They are living warnings, reshaping themselves as new movements rise, as new voices promise salvation, and as new dangers wear the mask of hope. Somewhere tonight, another room glows with the promise of transformation. Someone sits, notebook in hand, listening for wisdom, longing for acceptance. The language may be different, the rituals changed, but the risks remain. For those who watch NXIVM's tragedy unfold, vigilance becomes an act of care, a discipline against forgetting, a shield against repetition. The work of bearing witness does not end with a verdict or a sentence. It endures in every question we ask, every story we choose to hear, every time we refuse to let suffering slip back into the shadows. History does not settle. It circles us, demanding both remembrance and action. The machinery of abuse may hide behind 1,000 faces, but so too does the courage to resist, to speak, to rebuild, to stand at the threshold of the unknown and still choose to look, to listen, to learn. This is the unfinished vigil, a watch that belongs to all of us. If you found meaning in this journey, Join us as we continue to explore the untold, the uncomfortable, and the unresolved. For in shining a light, we honor not only the victims of the past, but the hope that together we can prevent such darkness from taking root again. And so, the story of NXIVM becomes more than a chronicle of one group's descent into darkness. It is a mirror held up to the world, a reminder that the search for belonging, for purpose, for transcendence is as old as humanity itself. The same longing that can build families, communities, and nations can also, in the wrong hands, be twisted into a weapon. The challenge is not to silence that longing, but to meet it with discernment, humility, and the courage to question even the most seductive promises. In the aftermath, survivors and witnesses alike are left with the task of rebuilding. For some, this means advocacy and education, turning pain into prevention, warning others of the subtle signs of coercion and control. For others, it is a quieter journey, learning to trust again, to reclaim the language of hope, to find meaning in the ordinary. Each act of healing, no matter how small, is a thread in the tapestry of resistance. To those who listen, who remember, who refuse to look away, you are part of this unfinished vigil. The work is never done, but neither is the possibility of change. If this story moved you, subscribe and join us as we continue to illuminate the hidden corners of history and the human soul. For only in remembering, questioning, and bearing witness can we hope to keep the darkness at bay and honor the fragile, persistent light of those who survived.